let's have a conversation. So, the big debate going around in the Street Fighter community right now is the modern controls versus classic controls debate. For anyone who doesn't know, Street Fighter for the longest time has had a single control scheme made up of 6 buttons. So you have 3 punches and 3 kicks of varying strength, light, medium, heavy. Sure, in the old days of Street Fighter 1, you had those giant pressure control buttons, but I think most people try not to talk about that. That was a dark age. So before we go any further, let's essentially break down what modern controls are.
Before I do, I'm going to quickly ask you to like and subscribe. You might as well. It doesn't kill anyone.
So like I explained with classic controls, you had 3 punches, 3 kicks of varying strength. Modern controls basically halves that stress down to just having light, medium and heavy assigned to the face buttons of the controller. So you have one button that will control light attacks and will essentially build some kind of combo around that for you. Medium will do the same, heavy will do the same. So it definitely simplifies the system and takes a lot of thought out of it, so you don't have to stress about having all these buttons to press in a certain combo configuration. However, that does mean that you lose a lot of precision in your attacks. It means that you don't get to specify what exactly you want, and it basically kills a lot of flexibility in your combos. So, when you think about Capcom's goals, modern controls makes complete sense. Fighting games have always had what people would consider a high barrier of entry. You're coming into this game, you've got all these combos you need to learn, and you're expected to use that knowledge against other people. So if you're coming from a place where you don't have that legacy knowledge and that knowledge you've obtained over a bunch of other fighting games, you've got a decent hill to climb. Now, me personally, I kind of dispute that issue, mainly because I've never been a fighting game guy. I literally only really got into fighting games this year. What I find is the main issue and the main thing that stops people from really getting into fighting games, it's been the lack of good tutorials. It's always been difficult to work out just the basics of what you're trying to do. It's just not clear. It's never really been that clear. Different games will use different diagrams, and there's been very limited information you've had access to. Street Fighter 6 looks like it's changing that significantly with really good tutorial systems and a really good introduction for new players to learn. And that's why I don't really think the motion controls and the execution is the main issue. Now people are essentially competing with 2 different vehicles. One person is using the old manual gear stick, manually selecting their gears and using the handbrake and the clutch and all of that stuff. And then you've got the modern controls, which is essentially an automatic, and it's letting you kind of enjoy the drive more than having to worry about all of those details. And for a lot of people, they don't necessarily think it's fair. However, as with anything like this, the issues that this raises in these conversations, I essentially like to call it the Scrub Lord paradox, where if you use modern controls, you're a scrub. You're not good at the game, you're a noob, you're using modern controls. However, if you're worried about people using modern controls, that's because you're a scrub too. So thinking modern controls are strong or thinking that they're weak makes you a scrub. And if you're not a scrub and you don't like modern controls, then you're an elitist. You have this elitist view of how these games should be played and you're gatekeeping the community. There's basically no room for a reasonable opinion. And everyone's getting, pretty aggressive about it. I don't really think this is a player issue. It's a Capcom issue. People can play the game however they want at the end of the day. If you prefer modern controls to classic, go for it. If you think classic controls are the best way to play the game, then go for it. But I think this issue is that, Capcom has goals. Fighting games are always quite limited in their scope and the sales that they get. It's no surprise that Capcom wants to change that and wants to bring more people into the game and bring more players that are here to stay, potentially, because, some of these games, even games like Mortal Kombat, which, work for the casual crowd much more than games like Street Fighter or Tekken tend to, they still have massive player drop-offs. I mean, to be fair, most games do. It makes sense why modern is here, but why do people have issues with it? To try and make a long story short, essentially some of the shortcuts you get in modern controls can seem pretty powerful. If we use the uppercut as an example, it's your best way to defend from a jump in, and if you were doing a regular Shoryuken in classic controls, you would have to do a full forward, down, diagonal, forward motion, and modern controls lets you essentially press one button, which is pretty damn powerful and makes it near impossible to jump in on an experienced modern control player, and you wouldn't have that same fear with a classic control player. You know, some people don't really mind, some people don't care, but I can understand why people do. You know, that is a decent change to the game. You know, of course, yeah, if you are a brand new player and you don't know any of the fundamentals of Street Fighter or any other fighting game, it's probably not going to make much of a difference to you.
The same can be said about supers. You can enter them with pretty much one button, and as you can imagine, that also has a pretty big effect on how you can be punished.
Now, with all of those reasons being said, there are plenty of people that are just toxic and are just gatekeeping and don't want their precious baby to change, or, you know, they do think that anyone who uses modern controls is a scrub and that you're the worst person in the world. There are those people, you know, or there are the classic people who think that anyone who isn't a pro player complaining about any of this stuff is just being stupid, being a whiny baby, and using modern controls as the excuse for why they're not better in the game. So, what's the conclusion to this going to be? Well, no one's going to know until Street Fighter 6 is released, and really until it's been out for a while. The beta that we've been playing the last weekend and all the betas beforehand, they're all old builds. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of balance changes and little tweaks that we find out about when the full game releases. So we'll have to judge it then. I'm sure Capcom is aware of these debates, and I'm sure tweaks will come. At the end of the day, I think the real thing that people need to recognize is that it's not really an argument about whether one is better than the other. You know, you can make arguments and say, well, modern controls has this and that, and that's why it's better, or classic controls has all of these, you know, options, so that's why it's better. But it doesn't really matter which one's better. They should be more even. That's all that matters, is that for everybody to be satisfied, modern controls and classic controls need to be as even as possible. And at the end of the day, I think that is what Capcom wants. They aren't presenting modern controls as, you know, the noob option or the easy mode option. They want it to be side by side with classic controls. They want it to be an option that anyone can choose and feel good using. And if that's going to be the case, the balance is necessary. You know, and some people don't want that to happen and seem to think this is some war between the two control schemes, but at the end of the day, if everyone's going to live in harmony, you have to leave as little wiggle room as possible for anyone to complain and point out that one control scheme is better than the other.
That is all for today. If you somehow made it to the end of the video, please like and subscribe. If you made it this far, you might as well.